Hello, everyone. Wait, I'm on the, yeah, not this guy. Okay, cool. Yeah, hello. There's always more people in the room than you imagined there being when you accepted giving the talk. So I'm Davey. I made the original Stanley Parable mod that came out in 2011, and I wrote the new version that just came out like a few months ago. And you are? Who are you?
I'm William. I'm half of the design on the new Stanley Parable.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about choices today in Stanley Parable. I honestly don't know if any of this means anything, but we'll find out. Like, maybe you'll see something in it. Because, you know, we're, like, figuring it out all the time, right? Oh, there's still people coming in. I guess I should extend the nonsense preamble that I say to calm my aching nerves. All right. So I want to talk about choice and negotiation today. And basically, here's what I mean by negotiation. So, like, this is kind of an example of how choice operates in a lot of video games, which is that there's this choice that you're given, right? A or B. And that choice is one of many, many, many choices that you'll find in a typical game. And that choice is serving some bigger purpose. So in this case, that bigger purpose is like this big pink box there, right? And this bigger purpose could be a lot of things. Usually what this is a goal. You're trying to get to some outcome, right? And the choice that you're making along the way is helping you get to that bigger outcome, right? So basically the bigger pink box here is challenge. And the challenge is this thing that you're trying to overcome. And the choices are helping you overcome challenge. And there's lots and lots of ways that this manifests. You know, you might be playing like a strategy resource collecting building kind of game where, like, okay, I could allocate resource 1 into option A, which will give me like short-term benefits, but if I put it in option B, I won't get anything now, but like long-term, like down the line in the late game, I'll have this option available to me. Blah, blah, blah. We know how this works. Right? This is video games, right? And so, like, when you're trying to decide which one you want to do here, you're negotiating with yourself, right? Like, you're having this conversation. You're saying, like, okay, I weigh this benefit versus this cost. And the reason you're doing that is because you're trying to get to the bigger box. You're trying to get to the challenge, right? The thing externally. Like, that's why the choices exist. That's why the choices are meaningful, is because there's a thing that contextualizes them. Challenge, right? And so basically, this is this bigger challenge. You have this in mind the entire time as you're making all of these many, many choices. Okay, so let's take a step back. What if you removed all of the challenge? What would happen if you got rid of that bigger box? What would those choices look like? Would it be a video game? Maybe. Might not be a video game. That'd be pretty cool. So I still think that there is a negotiation happening here. Like, if you have choices that don't have an outcome attached to them, I think that you can still create negotiation and a conversation between those choices that is every bit as meaningful as if you had had a bigger challenge that those things were being applied to. Now, granted, you would have to construct it very differently, right? We don't have a lot of language for how to actually do this. We don't have a lot of language for creating choices that aren't tied to overcoming challenge in games, right? Like, that's just how we've always thought of it. We've always thought, well, like, that's what you do, right? And my question is, like, if you took it away and if you literally did not have that option available to you, could you still make it equally as compelling? What would the negotiation look like? You know, that internal conversation that you're having with yourself. Oh, I could do this, and that would, like, help me achieve this thing, or I could do this thing. What would that conversation look like if you were not doing it for a bigger challenge? The choices would have to be inherently expressive. The choices on their own would have to give you something, like, as of you making that choice. Not because it's going to something else, but, like, literally at the moment that you make that choice, you're getting something out of it. You're expressing yourself. You're learning something. You're growing. And I think that this can be every bit as compelling as a choice that exists to serve a bigger challenge. Now, granted, it's very hard, and because we don't know how to do it. And so like in just a minute, William is going to get up and going to go through a few examples of ways that we tried to tackle this issue in the Stanley parable, a few of kind of the solutions that we came up to for like how to actually like try and make these choices meaningful without a bigger goal. But for the moment, I want to propose that I think that this can be every bit as meaningful as having the bigger box there. And so like the question is like, how do you do this? And the first and foremost thing that I believe about all of this is that I have no idea, right? And this is good. This is what you want. This is what I want. I want to not know, right? Because I want every game that I go into that tackles this issue to surprise me. Like, I want to play a game that takes away that external challenge and is still expressive, and it surprises me. Because I get to that point where I'm making that choice, and I see something new about myself as a result of having made that choice, right? Like something that I didn't already know. I had to express myself in a totally different way. So like, I want every time we come back to this design question to throw everything out about what we thought. Like even the examples that we're going to go through with Stanley Parable, now we can't do those anymore, right? Because we need the next thing to have to show you something that you didn't know, like about how you make choices, right? But there are like one or two things that I have come to believe about how this works. And the first is that like the choices have to actually be fun or engaging in some way. I want you to actually like enjoy the process of making decisions, right? Like, you know, we can make this sound clinical and academic and everything, but I would really like it if you actually enjoyed what you were doing. And the other thing is that I think that there should be a lot of different possible ways to choose between these options. You know, so like even if there's a binary set of inputs, right, even if the game is mechanically only has like two things that you can do, I'd really love it if the player felt if there were lots of different ways that you could go about choosing between those two things, right? And when you do this, like when you set this up, essentially what we're doing is we're creating a stage, right? And those choices are props on that stage. So you might have the same stage, and you might have the same props, but if you take multiple people and put them in front of those props, they're going to do totally different things with it, right? Like giving two people the same prop is not the same as giving them the same, like, you know, expecting the same choice out of them. You're going to find out something new based on every single person who comes to those props, right? And that's what we want. We want a whole variety of player expression. We want every person who comes to it to see something new about themselves. And it's not about the outcome, right? It's not about where you're getting to. It's not about like the challenge that you're trying to overcome. It's about the fact that when I was on the stage with those props, I chose something that's a reflection of me. And so I'm going to give William a minute here to talk about like some of the ways that we tried to do this in Stanley. Like I said, these are all like, we came up with this and we're going to throw it out, right? Because it's no good anymore. Because if you came back to it again, you wouldn't get the same thing out of it. You wouldn't learn something new about yourself. And the important thing about all of these examples is that they exist without an external goal. There is nothing structurally or systemic that any of these things are supporting. There is always something else, something internal. And yeah.
It's my turn. Yes. Right. Okay. Right. Examples in the Stanley Parable about everything David just talked about. Okay, so for anyone who's just wandered in here and has no idea about what the Stanley Parable is, this is the first choice that the player comes up to in the game. The narrator kind of gives a spiel about kind of the background to this story, and then they come to these two doors, and the narrator says, Stanley walked through the door on the left, and then the player is given this choice. Now, I think this kind of, as far as kind of the stage and how the player interacts, I think this choice is all about authority and how the player responds to kind of a direct bit of authority. And speaking about like how players can experience different things. Some of them just don't even acknowledge that there's a choice, walk straight through the left door. Some of them just snap, disobey, say, oh, this is the point of the game, I'm going to go through the right door and disobey, and yes. And some of them kind of stop there for a minute and they think, oh, what information have I got so far? And they kind of go on this journey where they try and work out what's the right thing to do. And there's no right thing to do, and it comes from inside, and that's kind of like their expression and interaction with the game. Right, next slide. Okay, and so this is the phone choice. And earlier on in development, there was a timer that ticked down, and this created a lot of pressure on the player, because no other choice in the game had been timed before. And so they come up against this, and they panic, and they see, oh no, I've got to decide now, and I don't know what I'm going to do. And so, like, once again, this kind of creates an interesting kind of stage and platform for the players to kind of express and interact with the game and themselves. So, right, and so, yeah, some of them might shut down under pressure. They might think, oh, God, don't know, I don't want to pick up the phone. I'll just sit here and do nothing. And some of them kind of look back at what kind of information, again, they've been given, and they'll, like, bounce around inside themselves and kind of pilot this narrative and decide what they want to do that way. This is in an ending called the suicide ending, where the player it climbs up these stairs and throws themselves off repeatedly, while the narrator kind of begs them not to do it. And this is different. It's not meant to be funny. It's supposed to be really serious. Guys, please, come on. Right, so we kind of built this in a different way than most other kind of choices in the game. Most choices in the game kind of present a binary option, and we give the instruction and then leave the players to kind of decide. While with this, it's kind of more of a response rule system, and we kind of poke and prod the player as they move over here or move over there to kind of create, like the game is a stage, but this kind of starts to involve an actor, and we start to influence and interact with the player more directly. So rather than them bouncing around inside themselves, it's bouncing between themselves and the game. And it's just a different kind of way of doing it, and we thought it was cool. Okay, this choice is in the confusion ending, and where previously players have come up against two doors, and it's kind of a binary choice. They're presented with like an amalgamation of all these different kind of doors and choices and pathways, and they're not really quite ready for this, because they kind of come up against it and they think, oh God, I don't know what to do. All these different kind of things, and quite an interesting thing we saw was some of them would kind of get into choice paralysis, and they don't know what they want to do when presented with all these options. And while some of them will kind of go off on their own journey and try and make sense of kind of the corridors surrounding this kind of little part of the game. And it's all about player expression and interaction, and I'm tying a narrative through line. It's really great. Okay, and this information overload thing, we also did it a bit in the demo, where there's loads of red buttons, but this is a kind of a bit more transparent, and it's clear that we're going to tie this all back to a single point in the narrative. But it's maybe more funny or more serious, or I don't know. So we've got this part of the game, where Stanley dies and the screen cuts to black. And then to continue on, they have to press escape and scroll down and press quit. Now, this presents the player with a different kind of problem that they've got to solve and kind of find their way around, which is their fear of missing content. Everybody wants to kind of see, oh, there's a sign, I can't see what, some kind of minutes. I've got 5 minutes? Shit. Right, yeah, we've done enough about that. Okay. Right, waiting room. This kind of deals with the same notion of authority with the two doors. But in a more passive way, rather than as directly ordering the player not to do something. It's kind of, you've got to go through on this number, and it kind of frees the player and coaxes them to kind of maybe explore more, or kind of explore their curiosity more. And then we carry on in the demo to, do you like the Stanley Parable, yes or no? And this choice was built up to throughout the kind of entirety of the demo, and we kind of got an interesting reaction with this, because people were quite self-conscious when deciding if they liked our game or not, because whether it be playtesting or YouTube, people kind of do know that we might be kind of watching them. And so, yeah, this is a bit weird, because can they express if they're being watched? Are they expressing clearly, or are they kind of putting on a mask for other people? And of course, the next choice is the most serious one in the game, which is the baby fire. And I kind of think this kind of ties everything together, because it kind of uses timing and authority, and it kind of brings all this together without kind of a real objective challenge in the game. And yeah, and so like the variety of the ways players can kind of express themselves in this is just kind of like, wow, cool. Yeah, so I'm wrapping up now, and I just want to say that, but also, this, a sub-note is that we didn't actually think about this when we were designing the game, and So it's kind of a happy accident that we're coming here and being able to tell you all this. So it didn't help us, but it might help you.
Yeah, and just as like a final note, I do actually think that, you know, even though we've said like there's no bigger a goal or objective behind any of these, like this stage to me actually is a bigger goal, but it's a player created goal, right? It's something that the player gets to own because they're the ones building a box around it. If we as designers remove the box but still give the players interesting props, then they, as an engaged player, get to build that for themselves. And then there's like a sense of ownership. And then it's like, oh, I made that, right? I created an external goal and an objective. But the goal is not like overcoming a challenge. It's learning about myself. It's learning about how I respond to adversity. It's about learning when I'm under pressure, you know, or when I think someone's watching me. How do I deal? And I think that that is every bit as meaningful and awesome as any other challenge or external goal that any other game could do. And I hope more games do it. And that's about it.